Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Our entire sugarcane cultivation is made up of cambered beds. Modern mechanical cane harvesters cannot work on such beds. But our soils are not only low-lying, heavy clay soil, it's very acid. And any moving of such soil to convert to flatland for mechanization brings even more acidic, even toxic subsurface layers of soil to the surface, which is guaranteed to produce poor yields. And this complicates our process of conversion for mechanization. We have been trying since the 70s to convert these fields, and it has proved to be practically impossible. It is why we must diversify because there is no future in sugar for Guyana, competing as it is with fully mechanized competitors such as Australia and Brazil. This situation cannot be corrected, and it is insanity to do the same wrong thing over and over again and expect that it will give a different, more desirable outcome. The following two pictures prove this.
This first picture was taken by me in 2016 when, as a director of Gaisuco, I flew over Enmore LBI. The damage to the cane growth from the primitive attempts to change the field layout from mechanical harvesting was a disaster. And 80% of this estate was done this way. As a result, they had to close the 15,000 acre East Demerara estate due to, quote, no cane in the fields. As for comparison, you will see Albion cane fields, which I took at the same time from the air because I was flying as a director. I was going to Skeldon to see if there was any baby. Albion cane from the air, it looks very different. It's grown fully well. You're getting good yield on the ground. The yellowing on the left bottom of your screen is actually ripe cane, and the green on the left side is actually young cane just coming up. But if you look carefully, you will see no blank places where there's no cane growing because the conversion or the attempt to convert these fields for mechanical tillage had not been attempted.
Since we have become uncompetitive in sugar, we are forced to look for something to diversify to, which will replace the sugar industry in time. To do this successfully, we have to look for some other agricultural enterprise which will turn our liabilities, high rainfall, heavy clay soils, low-lying acid land, etc., into assets. Since 2017, we have expert international opinion that it is very feasible to do aquaculture on our condition.
Now let's examine the equation whereby we compare the Guyana situation and a sugar versus aquaculture asset and liability balance sheet. One, our heavy rainfall for sugar is a liability. For aquaculture, it's an asset. Heavy silt, clay soil, in sugar, it's a liability. For agriculture, it's an asset. It's an asset because it holds water well, and so when you flood your fields, the water just doesn't seep out. The poor drainage in our sugar industry is a liability, but for aquaculture, it'll be no problem and even probably an asset. Water transport is a semi-liability. It's cheap, but establishes a high water table in the field for sugar, but will become an asset for aquaculture. Mechanization is impossible for sugar due to high rainfall and heavy clay soil and cambered beds, but not important to being an asset for aquaculture. Abundant water from rainfall and reservoir trenches is a liability for sugar, but a great asset for aquaculture. The return per acre on cultivation sugar guarantees losses when aquaculture gives a far greater return. The overcast weather conditions is a liability for sugar, especially in an environment of mechanization, but it's a great asset for aquaculture. Labor in the sugar industry is intensive and very expensive and seasonal. But for aquaculture, it's less intensive, but has a longer 365-day per year operation. So let's introduce aquaculture. Global wild fish catch, both from rivers and ocean, has not increased since the early 1990s and has remained relatively constant at around 90 to 95 million tons per year. But during that same time, the population of the planet Earth has grown from 5.7 billion in 1995 to 8.2 billion in 2025. This extra demand for protein has caused an explosion in fish farming, which is growing very rapidly. Today, the total income from all aquaculture worldwide is 312 billion US dollars, whilst the entire international sugar industry of this planet is now only 66.39 billion. So aquaculture has a very bright future, especially on a planet which is the population is expanding the way this is. So whatever we spend now converting will, if not immediately be successful, will still be an excellent investment in our people and our future. But it will be successful. Well, let's look at some of our assets. We have to look at our climate, our soil, our land layout, and temperature conditions consistent with being a world-class agricultural producer. So the right location is key. Examples of large-scale aquaculture operations in recent times has led to the changing of using large ponds, which you could see on the left, which have proved difficult to manage and to harvest. So most countries are converting to smaller 8 to 10 acre ponds, which is what you can see on the left side, of the right side of the screen. The Guyana cane fields are seen in this picture from the air. Can you see the similarity? Each field of approximately 10 acres is a pond, since our method of irrigation has always been by flooding. They are already there, complements of our ancestors. To produce these ponds for aquaculture today would be incredibly expensive, giving us an enormous startup advantage over our competitors. Now, this is the fields when they were flooded. At the bottom, you will see a darkish color water. That is the water from the conservancy. The brown water in the fields, you could see that the water from the conservancy is almost the same level as the water in the field. So most of these fields flood by gravity. You don't even have to use a pump. And because of its heavy clay nature, it holds water very well. So unlike elsewhere, where we do aquaculture on lighter soils, they have to use expensive geotextile material to hold the water in, whilst in Guyana, we wouldn't have that problem. We simply have to put water in and put the fish in its most simplistic terms. Now in 2016, at my instigation, Gaisuko brought one of the most qualified agriculturalists in the world, Dr. Claude Boyd, a professor at Auburn University in the United States of America, to inspect our conditions, analyze our climate, water, and soil, which he incidentally found to be very acid, a fact which, to this day, Gaisuko has never addressed, even though it's probably hindering their cane yields. He also examined our rainfall, our temperature, soil structure, and layout of over 300-acre tilapia pond system, which led to an American company submitting directly to Gaisuko board a few months later a feasibility study of tilapia cultivation yielding 10,000 pounds per acre per year at 80 US cents per pound. This would give a total earning of 8,000 per acre per year, US dollars. Growing prawns is several times more lucrative. It's more like 25 to 30,000 per acre per year. We could not grow prawns at will since not enough salt in the Demerara River that far up, and so that is why we settled for tilapia. The same area growing sugarcane would yield 500 US, which is the cost, the price we getting for approximately for 1 ton of sugar, multiplied by 2 tons per acre, which is Gaisuko's current yield, which is the US $1,000 per acre per year. I want to repeat this. Growing fish and prawns and so on is tens of thousands of US dollars per acre per year, whilst growing sugarcane on the same land is approximately 1,000 US dollars per acre per year. 9 years after Gaisuko paid millions for this world-class opinion from a professor of agriculture, they are still wallowing in indecision and incompetence, still wasting our economic resources on sugar. We dishonor our ancestors who spent centuries giving us that wonderful layout of canals, which is now so perfect for aquaculture, the fastest expanding and most lucrative agricultural enterprise on earth. Ladies and gentlemen, visionless, greedy, incompetent people shouldn't run for public office. So let's look at our temperature. Perfect does not even begin to describe. I want to spend a few minutes here telling about fish. Fish is the most economical of all agricultural products. It takes the least amount of feed to produce 1 pound of meat. For example, 1.5 pounds of feed, gives 1 pound of fish. The reason is simple. A chicken, for example, living in Guyana has a temperature of 99 degrees or whatever it could be. And in New York, in winter, it would have the same temperature. But tropical fishes, for example, their body temperature is exactly the same as the water in which they're living. So the temperature of the water is very important for tropical species. As the water gets cooler, their metabolism slows down and they become more inefficient. But take a look at our level. We have, our daily average temperature does not vary by more than 3 degrees centigrade throughout the entire year. That doesn't happen very many other places. Our average nighttime temperature is only an amazing 7 degrees less than the daytime temperature. The temperature of the water is exactly the same. It's very, very uniform, very level, with a very small drop of 28.3 degrees centigrade, which is less than 1 degree centigrade different throughout the entire year, because the water loses the heat less quickly than the air. So in the night, when you feel cool, the water actually is maintaining some of the heat it's absorbed during the day. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our rainfall. This is one of the heaviest rainfalls on this planet. In this graph, you could see, and it tells the tale very graphically. During the 12 months of the year in Guyana, rain will fall on more than 15 days in every month except September, October, and November. Note that the two heavy rainfall periods, December, January, and May, June, July, when the rain will fall on 19 to 21 days of every month during the rainy season. Therefore, these conditions growing sugarcane is an enormous impediment. But on the other hand, growing fish, it means that it is an asset because you don't have to keep topping up your fields by pumping water into it. The rain is giving you, and when the rain hits the water in the field, it actually causes a turbulence which introduces oxygen for the fish. So it's a win-win situation, this heavy rainfall. There are also many other job opportunities outside in the field where the ponds are located. The jobs include harvesting and putting new fields into production every day. That is, on a 14-acre aqua farm working 365 days a year, 3.8 acres must be harvested and processed every day. And for continuity, 3.8 acres must be restocked every day. The sugarcane could be harvested and put at the Demerara sugar terminals until it could go out in a ship. But to market the fish and to export it, you really have to be continuously harvesting and selling out to the public. Keeping the weeds free of weeds, another debris is another daily work that the people will have to do. Daily checking the water for quality at various depths to monitor the oxygenation and pollution of the water, etc. Security against theft and sabotage. That has to 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Identifying and removing predators 24 hours, 365 days a year. Maintaining transport canals. Ladies and gentlemen, our model will continue to use canals for transport of labor, product, feed, etc. Since they're already there, so why not use them? And secondly, they are the cheapest form of transport on this planet, water transport. Maintenance of the levees around the ponds, what we call dam beds, which will have to be higher and a little bigger. would have to be maintained very scrupulously, because if one field blows out, then you will end up losing quite a bit. Thanks to our very heavy clay soil, it very rarely, if ever, blows out. The most important operation is feeding. It amounts to more than 70 to 75% of total expenditure, and it has to be done a few times every day, all year. The creation of jobs, the more you do in your aquaculture, if you simply grow the fish and sell it to somebody to process it, you don't make anywhere near as close as if you process it yourself, bag it and freeze it, which we can very easily do. Then, since the feed is the most important and expensive part of the entire aquaculture operation, we will have to manufacture our own feed. And fish feed is a floating feed, and it has to have enough protein. In India, for example, when they first introduced aquaculture more than 30 years ago, the Indian government discovered that the aquaculture was not very lucrative because the feed was too expensive. It was costing 90 rupees per kilo to buy the fish feed. So the Indian government, through its technical institute, looked around India for indigenous materials, and then they started producing a feed which is 40 rupees per kilogram, and from that point on, the industry took off. And now it's quite a large industry in India. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I was the chairman of the Strategic Committee of Gaisuko, which presented the strategy paper to the government in 2021. This is how we recommended that the lands at the abandoned East Demerara estates be divided and allocated. I was chairman of the Strategic Committee of Gaisuko, which presented the strategy paper to the government in 2021. And this is how we recommended that the lands at the abandoned East Demerara estates be divided and allocated. Red, the area close to Ogle, we decided to reserve it for the use by the government. Yellow, to be leased out to farmers or whoever would like to lease a piece of land to put a factory, or blue for housing, purple for farming, green for agriculture, and brown for existing housing areas. The government and the Ministry of Agriculture, however, decided that none of this land should be given out to anyone to do anything. The area is in green, about 11,000 acres was where I wanted to put the 700-acre shrimp farm. Any one of those areas, not all of them. Those areas total 5,000, I just want 5,000 hectares or 11,000 acres. I only wanted 700 acres. Growing Vaname prawns there at expected yield, 2 crops per year, and the price we would earn over 150 million per year growing prawns there. Why the government could not allocate just 700 acres for such a lucrative project is a question which they must answer. To put this in perspective, this Google Earth map shows the area of the abandoned sugar estates compared to the entire area of the city of Georgetown. What are they reserving that land to do? There's no way you could put housing in that abandoned sugar estate of 11,000 acres.
I campaigned in 2020 with the PPP. They won that election almost entirely because of the closure of those East Coast estates in 2017 by the APNU. And everyone knows what promises we made to those laid off workers. I spent most of 2021 doing a feasibility study of growing Vaname prawns on the East Coast, Demerara, which would have employed a lot, if not most, of those 7,000 workers, doing a far less strenuous job, 365 days a year, learning new, more appropriate skills than doing the hard work in the sugarcane field, competing unsuccessfully with the world, which is mostly doing that kind of work mechanically. And that is why I chose that area. But equally important for Vaname prawns, the water has to contain at least 8,000 parts per million of salt. So the prawns industry could only be established on the former sugar estate laid out lands on the coast of Guyana, close to the Atlantic. The PPP did not want to allocate that land on the East Coast. They seemed to be reserving it for themselves or for some other obscure reason which had nothing to do with the welfare of the workers. So I was offered lands which were formerly sugar estate land, but where there was no salt water in the upper Berbice and Corentyne rivers, Rose Hall and Skeldon, with less than 900 parts per million of salt, when in fact the feasibility required at least 8,000 parts per million of salt. The feasibility was very clear, ladies and gentlemen, with two non-negotiable requirements. One, on the coast close to salt water, and two, the Guyana Sugar Estate field layout lands. These people just say they're concerned about the former sugar workers. It's a lie. They are only concerned with enriching themselves.